Okay, we're making good progress, and we can go to now to the correctness checklist. Everybody, please. And we'll start with the first item. Judy, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. The first issue I'd like to raise is sort of a general issue, and that is I'm not sure that all the state changes for all the variables are documented within this procedure that we're reviewing today. I don't know within this procedure that we're reviewing today. I don't know whether it's just documentation or not a clean mapping back to the requirements, but I look at this code and I don't get the warm feeling that everything's accounted for.
Well, that's an interesting point, because we use the corporate documentation standards, and this particular system is maybe different from others that we've developed before, and because there are so many state changes, I think that would be an excellent idea to incorporate that. I'd in fact like to suggest that it be included in our documentation standards. So I see that my that they were included in some places where people felt necessary, but I think maybe in all places that would be
that sounds like a good
idea.
point. Tim, maybe you should record there are two issues, one about this particular product, and maybe we need to specify the place, and also the similar issue for the corporate standard.
Yeah, I'll try to maybe submit a suggestion. We can work on that and submit a change for the corporate doc standards.
Okay.
Do you have where the location?
No, it was a general issue, so I guess there was no page number, and the first issue was the state changes for variables may not be documented. And the general issue that came out of that is we should include these into documentation standards for corporate standards.
Go ahead, Judy.
The second issue that I have, and this is the last one, so I'll be done real fast, is for the user index type.
Judy, what page are you on, please?
Bottom of page 545.
Yeah.
About the third line from the bottom, user index type. I can't seem to find the documentation for user index type in front of me, but if memory serves me correct, I'm not quite sure that that data structure is sufficient to handle all the necessary operations required of it in this particular piece of code. I think somebody needs to go back and check that out, and maybe gives the appropriate forward references.
You're suggesting somebody should walk through it?
That would really be helpful.
You know what happened is that is a type that's used all over the system, so it's defined at a higher level, and it doesn't, it's not in the scope of this review. However, there should be a walkthrough of that, and I should have included that so you could understand what was happening here. Right?
That's fine.
Okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Tim. Roger, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple issues. The if-then nest on the second page, 546. In looking at the code right here, there's a number of if statements here which are nested. It seems as though a more efficient implementation might be a case implementation. So the issue I'm raising is suggesting that the if be examined and see if the case is more appropriate.
Okay. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The reason why we got into that is because of the way that the compiler works. And so we really did not have any choice but to do it this way for optimization purposes.
So you've actually taken a look at the generated code right here. And this happens to be more efficient, and you've made that trade-off then.
Yeah. As soon as we've got the compiler, found out what areas.
Well, that completes the issues on completeness. Let's now move on to the correctness checklist, looking at this message manager. Dan, what is your feeling about the structured programming prime constructs? Do you have any issues you'd like to raise?
Yeah, I have one on the if-then-else constructs in the procedure valid store.
Excuse me, Dan, let me just make sure we've all got that focused. It's the one that reads if valid code, then store message and if?
Yeah, that's the one. I'm concerned that there is no else clause associated with that if-then statement, and we know what happens if the code is valid, we store the message. But if the code is not valid, then there's no action specified. The documentation for this procedure on the previous page seems to indicate that there should be something being done there, and I don't see any corresponding code for that.
As far as I can see, I missed that. You're correct. That there should be, in fact, documentation does say that there's an exception that should be raised. So I've made a note of that. Rob, do you have? Okay. Thank you.
Ken?
Following this checklist, my comment concerns number 4. Does the input domain span all legal values? And I'm looking at the procedure valid store and the package message management. And it's not clear from this code product that all the legal message types are covered. So I have a coverage problem.
Okay, Ken, let me just make sure here that we're talking about the same thing. You're talking about the package header, which contains the procedure valid store, and it takes 2 arguments, message, which of type in message type, and the valid code, which is of out valid code type. Is that the one?
That's right, that's right. And if there is a problem, it seems to be with message type, with one of the
Did you
input parameters.
actually look at the specification of message type?
Yes.
And what were you concerned about in particular?
That at least one of the valid message types is not covered, is not, will not be handled by this piece of code.
Which particular one is that?
I think it's the WAC, the wait acknowledge.
Yeah, that's covered under the found message type, but I see your point, and that point, I think, if you can help me, is that found is certainly not a good variable name for wait acknowledge.
Yeah, so maybe there's a
maybe there's a
problem
documentation, not so much a range problem, but a documentation
see.
problem. And I will.
Are there any changes to the baseline?
Well, as a matter of fact, there was just recently, yesterday, marketing came into my office, and unfortunately, the change is a large one, and I'm not sure whether it's right to go on or not. We are changing from supporting a single processor to multiprocessor, which is quite a large change in the baseline. The problem is, in my mind, they assure me that this is completely necessary. The problem, in my mind, is whether now we've got a system and it's going to require a major overhaul. Now, maybe we can reuse some of these components. However, I think some of the architecture is going to need to change drastically to support multiprocessor. So I'm not sure how much we're going to need how much we're going to be able to salvage at this point. However, it seems to me to be a terrible waste to flush everything down the toilet, especially since that I'm still under severe schedule constraints. They're not giving me license to completely revise the system. They're not giving me time and resources to start all over again. So it's clear I'm going to have to try to salvage some of this. And it might be worthwhile to go through the review simply because not only I can pinpoint problems where errors might occur in the system, and maybe problems with my people, having known who designed and coded what. So in my estimation, certainly would be helpful to me now that you put in some time to review it, but it's your call.
Ken, what do you think?
I think that's, Warren's right, that's absolutely a major change, but I don't agree that it's worth continuing to review at this time. I think that's going to, using multiprocessing is going to introduce huge architectural changes, and we may reuse some pieces, but that'll be her decision, and it's to be another product for us to review. Anybody else agree?
Dan?
Well, I think certainly we can save some time in the review process by marking out which things have not changed, but we've got all sorts of issues of record locking, processor synchronization, time drift that are really going to severely influence this design. So I think there are going to be substantial changes here. Some stuff can obviously be reused, but there are other sections where the changes are going to be either quite blatant or very subtle lying underneath, and I think we have to step back a bit.
Do you have any responses?
Only that maybe we could go through, I'm anxious to have the review because it's certainly going to make my product better, and if we can have, you know, I feel that your time has been wasted, and I would like to call in on your expertise again to review the product. It's getting a little tedious, so if we can actually just go through some things that you didn't feel would change drastically, or look at some of the code and look at some of the style of the code, or other things where I could gain, you know, where we all gain some benefit. I could gain some benefit out of the time that you spent, and you wouldn't feel like it was completely down the drain. Then in my eyes, it would certainly be helpful.
Okay, let's pause. I've come to a decision, Lauren, we're going to have to cancel this review.
Okay.
You know what that means. It means that you're going to have to go over and determine what kinds of changes you're going to have to make because of this change to multiprocessor.
Okay. Well, obviously I haven't done any planning.
The SDP will reflect the change, and then also in the review, you'll schedule a review of the SDP.
Yeah.
Okay.
No question. No question.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, now that we've resolved all the questions on sequence, are there any issues on if-then or if-then-else constructs? Ken?
Yeah, Dan, I have one. If you look at the last procedure in the program, that begin block, there's only one if-then construct there, and it's missing an else, and I think it's obvious.
Is that valid store, procedure valid store?
That's right, that's right.
That's on page 2.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Ken. Not only that, but as long as we're in this block of code, I don't know where these coding standards came from, but the indentation is all messed up.
What do you mean? They were distributed with the project.
In
These aren't the-
procedure
I've got
validate,
it, Stan.
there's
Yeah,
also
look at
missing
message
if-then.
management too. I mean, the indentation
That's an
too
issue
is
about
the same
completeness, and we
thing.
covered that.
It's the same style issue in procedure validate as in
Style
Message
is
management,
defined.
message
discussing
management too,
style.
and
But this
procedure
isn't the way we do
store. Yeah, I
We're
mean,
not
they're
on
all
style
the
right
same
now.
But
weird
this isn't the way
standard,
that we
and it
do
doesn't
them.
look
We're
right.
addressing
And
the
they're all
first
All of them are just
if-then
written up.
question
I mean,
They're all different.
that
You
we're
know, if
talking
we had
about
automated
here.
support,
That
that
only
might
makes
be
it
better.
worse.
Come on.
Well, I know, I mean, the coding standard is just crazy. This is ridiculous.
They may be crazy,
not-
but I
we're
follow
not
it.
addressing this issue right now.
No, that wasn't up to us.
But they're all different. I mean, all of this stuff
Lauren.
is different. This is not the same, this is
Lauren.
not the same style as this is the
Well, who
same
supplies
style.
any
I mean,
sample?
what is this?
the style's
This is not
consistent.
even
To be
code.
fair here,
Yeah,
but
we're
it's just
just
not the right
consistent.
size.
It's absolutely
We're
not
talking about the
consistent.
We've used that
if-then-else
standard for
constructs.
months. There isn't any
No,
problem.
well, they
We're-
must
we're
not
talking
be
about the
the
if-then
same.
Besides, you know, in
constructs.
1965,
Dan,
the things were great.
well, we're not discussing this issue right now. All right.
Standards, and I've been following them for years.
People,
I mean, I don't
please.
know why
No, I
now
don't-
following
It's
the
curious thing.
Now, come on, we're supposed to be following the procedure here. Everybody's talking about different issues at once. We're not even addressing the issue at hand. We're supposed to be following the checklist as it is listed out. We had just completed sequence. We're starting on if-then-else. Mike, there was an original issue that was raised about a single if-then-else with an else missing. Could you bring us back to that, please? And let's follow the checklist and wait until we're called on.
Procedure, I have here in my notes, procedure valid store, page 2. In the body, the if-then, the first if-then statement there after the call to validate.
Ken, is that the issue that you had raised originally?
That's right. Yep.
All right. Dan, would you comment on that, please?
I've always followed this.
All right, then. Any questions on the if-then constructs or if-then-else constructs? Ken?
Yeah, I have one, Dan. I think if you look at the last if-then construct on page 2, it seems that there's the else option is missing, the else path for that if-then.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be a little bit of a problem. Let's see, if the valid code... Yeah, but then again, valid code, I presume, is binary.
So that would tend to make things somewhat easier. It would just fall through, you know. That's not, I don't think, a major problem.
It's not major, and that's true. It's valid code's binary, but either the documentation's wrong or the design document's not complete because it should state, they seem to imply that there is another choice.
Okay. Well, we can certainly put that down and, you know, make sure that we can certainly put in at least commentary on a commented out else portion or something like that.
That would be fine. That'd be
To make sure we at least indicate we've thought about it. No problem.
Okay, Rob, do you have any issues?
Yeah, I've got an issue with respect to the case statement. Also in procedure valid store, the others clause right now is only handled with a null statement,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's the
Excuse me,
appropriate thing to do.
Rob, hold on a second.
I'm sorry, so what did we decide on the if-then statement? What to,
Well, I think what we're trying to do is he was trying to bring up the point that we hadn't written down right now the else statement and just putting a comment in there with an else statement just to indicate that we indeed have thought about it.
where was
That's what
that?
we're doing.
I'm sorry, I guess maybe part of the problem is I don't know where we are.
Can you bring us to that location in the code, please?
Yeah, that's on page 2, okay? Page 2, procedure valid store. Valid.
Oh, okay.
Okay, see here, it says message of in message type, valid code of out, valid.
Okay, I see it, I see
Okay,
it.
see, you
Okay.
find
Okay,
that. Okay.
yeah, sorry to interrupt.
All right,
Go ahead.
that was all?
That's all, that's fine, I got it.
Okay.
Rob, can you continue?
Okay, getting back to the others clause, as I was saying, you have a null statement in there, and because the case statement doesn't exhaustively test all the different values of type, I think that we should know when you get into the other situation, if one of the others hasn't been selected, then you should either raise an exception or you should do something intelligent.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, at least for debugging purposes, we should be calling something to keep a trace or something like that. Yeah, that should be no problem, and we can certainly, you know, make it so that code doesn't appear in the production version, so there's no hit on performance or anything. It's a very good point. We'll put that in.
All right, Ken, do you have any other issues?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the issue of complete exhaustion of all the message types. And I'm talking here about procedure valid store. Now, one of the input parameter to that procedure is message type, and I'm just concerned that not all the valid message types have been covered.
I'm sorry, you're moving too fast for me. We're talking about the case statement and I mean earlier, just a moment ago, okay?
This, I think, is Rob's issue we're talking about. Can you bring us
Yes.
back to that place, Lauren?
Yeah, right, that's on page 5. It's the case statement in
5, okay.
procedure prepared.
Okay, I understood that. I guess I had,
See,
did we,
I
okay.
can read more if you want.
So, can you review what the resolution of that issue was, please?
Yeah, what we're going to do is
Thanks.
actually build essentially code that would only appear in the debugging version, and we would copy
Any further issues? Rob?
I've got one more. I have a question about the message database. This is in the package specification for message management. The message database is declared as a global object, and I don't see any reason why it ought to be available to the outside.
I'm sorry, but are we really looking at the right thing here? I'm just a bit confused by the previous problem here still. Frankly, I got my papers a little bit out of order here, and I can't. I'm not making the right reference to what package we were talking about when we were talking about the message types.
Okay, we're talking about message management package.
Okay,
That's on
yes.
page 1.
Why don't we back up a bit here? We've raised a couple of issues. We've raised the initial if-then-else, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That was mine.
The resolution of that was to put in the dummy clause.
the dummy
correct?
clause, right?
Do you have that issue
Yes.
as resolved in your notes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Second issue, Rob,
The others clause.
was the otherwise clause. The resolution of that briefly was to,
Was to put in some debugging calls to make sure that it's being called when it's appropriate, but to make it in a if-def so that it doesn't necessarily appear in the production code, so we don't have a performance hit.
okay, is that what you have in your notes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Third issue,
Third issue was whether all the message types in that procedure valid stored were covered. All the possible ones were enumerated there.
Okay, and the resolution of that briefly?
Tell you the truth, I can't remember. What did you have down there for what you did have?
Well, that you would make changes to the code in the caller to address the mismatch.
That's right. I think it was more of an issue of where the check was being done for possible